We live in an age that markets confidence as a feeling you can summon on demand. Repeat the right phrases, adopt the right posture, silence doubt, and confidence will magically appear. Yet history, experience, and careful observation tell a very different story. Confidence that is borrowed, rehearsed, or imagined collapses the moment it is tested. The confidence that endures is not claimed, it is earned. Earned confidence does not come from ignoring uncertainty, but from confronting it. It is forged in moments when assumptions are challenged, when beliefs are examined under pressure, and when convictions are required to produce action, not just agreement. It grows slowly, often quietly, through discipline, accountability, and repeated encounters with truth that proves itself reliable. This principle stands in direct contrast to the world's obsession with instant certainty. Nature itself does not operate on shortcuts. Structures stand because they are built on tested foundations. Systems function because laws are honored, not imagined away. In the same way, a person stands firm not because they feel strong, but because what they stand on has been verified. Tonight, we are not discussing confidence as bravado, nor faith as blind acceptance. We are examining a principle, one that rewards those willing to test what they believe, submit it to reality, and allow truth to earn their trust. This is the principle of earned confidence. Confidence, as it is commonly portrayed, is often little more than optimism wearing a mask of certainty. It is presented as something you can generate internally, independent of evidence, experience, or consequence. But confidence that originates solely from desire or repetition is fragile. The moment reality pushes back, it fractures. True confidence is not born in imagination. It is forged through testing. It emerges only after truth has been examined, challenged, and found reliable under pressure. There is a fundamental difference between believing something and knowing why you believe it. Untested belief is comfortable because it demands nothing. Tested belief, however, requires exposure to uncertainty, risk, and sometimes loss. When a principle survives scrutiny, when it continues to function despite resistance, it earns credibility. Confidence grows not because doubt was avoided, but because doubt was answered. This is why earned confidence carries weight. It has history behind it. It remembers the storms it has endured and the outcomes that followed. Optimism says, everything will work out. Earned confidence says, I have seen this hold when everything did not work out. One is emotional anticipation, the other is experiential knowledge. The world encourages people to skip this process, to speak boldly without understanding, to claim certainty without examination. Yet the universe itself does not reward shortcuts. Every reliable system, whether physical, logical, or moral, operates consistently because it is governed by laws that do not bend to preference. Testing is not an enemy of truth. It is truth's ally. What is false fears examination. What is true invites it. When a belief cannot withstand honest questioning, it does not deserve confidence, it demands revision. Earned confidence is therefore humble by nature. It recognizes that confidence grows proportionally with understanding, and understanding grows through discipline, study, and correction. This humility is not weakness, it is structural integrity. There is also a cost involved. Earned confidence requires patience. It develops over time through repeated application and observation. It is often built in obscurity, far from applause, while the individual learns to trust principles that have proven consistent even when outcomes were inconvenient. This is why earned confidence does not need to announce itself. It does not rely on volume or visibility. It speaks through steadiness. When pressure arrives, and it always does, borrowed confidence evaporates. Earned confidence remains. It remains because it is anchored in something external and objective, not internal and emotional. Feelings fluctuate, circumstances shift. Truth does not. Those who ground their convictions in what has been tested are not easily shaken, because their assurance does not depend on mood, momentum, or majority opinion. This is the quiet strength of earned confidence. It does not panic when challenged, because challenge is familiar territory. It does not retreat when questioned, because questions have already been faced. It is resilient precisely because it was not protected from difficulty, but shaped by it. And in a world increasingly built on appearances rather than foundations, earned confidence stands apart. Not flashy, not loud, but unmovable. Knowledge by itself carries no guarantee of confidence. In fact, knowledge that remains unapplied often produces the opposite effect, insecurity disguised as arrogance. When information accumulates without obedience to what that information demands, it inflates the ego but weakens the foundation. A person may sound certain, speak fluently, and quote extensively, yet lack the quiet assurance that only comes from lived alignment with truth. Confidence is not validated by how much one knows, but by how faithfully one acts on what is known. There is a subtle danger in separating understanding from responsibility. Knowledge reveals what ought to be done, but obedience determines whether that knowledge becomes trustworthy. When a principle is obeyed, it is tested in real conditions. It encounters resistance, inconvenience, and consequence. Only then does it prove whether it is theoretical or dependable. Confidence grows when obedience confirms that truth functions as promised, not merely as described. Arrogance emerges when knowledge is treated as an end rather than a beginning. It assumes authority without submission, certainty without verification. Such confidence is loud because it is insecure. It must defend itself constantly, silence dissent, and avoid exposure. Earned confidence, on the other hand, welcomes examination because it has already passed through it. It does not confuse familiarity with mastery. It understands that truth does not yield its strength to spectators, only to participants. Obedience sharpens perception. When a principle is lived out, nuances appear that were invisible in theory. Consequences reveal boundaries. Discipline exposes depth. What once seemed abstract becomes concrete. This transformation is critical because confidence rooted in abstraction collapses when reality introduces complexity. Confidence rooted in obedience adapts because it has learned how truth behaves under strain. There is also a moral dimension to this process. Knowledge carries accountability. To know what is right and refuse to act on it erodes integrity. Over time, this erosion creates internal conflict. A divided self cannot sustain confidence. Assurance requires alignment between belief and behavior, understanding and action. When these are synchronized, the individual becomes internally stable. That stability is felt as confidence, but it is actually coherence. The world often celebrates intellectual sharpness while ignoring moral discipline. Yet history consistently demonstrates that those who change outcomes are not merely informed, but obedient to principles larger than themselves. They trust those principles because they have submitted to them, endured their demands, and witnessed their reliability. Their confidence is calm because it does not rest on cleverness, but on consistency. This is why earned confidence is inseparable from obedience. It is not blind compliance, but informed submission. One obeys not because they lack understanding, but because understanding has convinced them that truth deserves allegiance. Each act of obedience becomes another data point, another confirmation, another reinforcement of trust. Over time, confidence accumulates, not as bravado, but as assurance. Such confidence cannot be faked. It reveals itself in restraint, in patience, in the refusal to compromise when pressure offers shortcuts. It does not need to assert superiority because it is not trying to prove itself. It knows where it stands because it has stood there before, repeatedly, faithfully. Knowledge may open the door, but obedience is what allows confidence to walk through it and remain standing on the other side. Confidence that endures is never rooted in popularity, consensus, or the shifting moods of a culture. Cultural opinion is unstable by nature, constantly reshaped by trends, emotion, and convenience. What is celebrated today is often discarded tomorrow, not because it was wrong, but because it became inconvenient. When confidence is built on such ground, it must be constantly adjusted, defended, and rebranded. Alignment with eternal principles, however, produces a different kind of assurance, one that does not require permission from the times. Eternal principles do not negotiate with preference. They operate consistently, regardless of whether they are acknowledged, ignored, or opposed. Gravity does not ask for belief, it simply functions. Moral and spiritual laws operate with similar indifference to opinion. When a person aligns their life with such principles, confidence emerges naturally, not because outcomes are always pleasant, but because they are predictable. Predictability is the soil in which trust grows. Cultural confidence is reactive. It depends on affirmation, applause, and agreement. It rises when supported and collapses when challenged. Earned confidence, by contrast, is proactive. It is anchored in commitments made before pressure arrives. Those commitments are tested over time, not in ideal conditions, but in moments of loss, isolation, and misunderstanding. When alignment with eternal principles is maintained through such moments, confidence matures into conviction. There is a cost to this alignment. Standing on enduring truth often places one at odds with prevailing narratives. It may require restraint when indulgence is praised, patience when outrage is rewarded, and integrity when compromise is profitable. Yet each time a principle is honored despite disadvantage, its reliability is reinforced. The individual learns that obedience to truth may be costly, but it is never chaotic. The outcomes may be delayed, but they are never random. This process reshapes identity. Instead of asking, "What do people expect of me?" the aligned individual asks, "What does truth require of me?" This shift is subtle but profound. It relocates authority from external validation to internal coherence with what is unchanging. Confidence grows because the reference point no longer moves. When circumstances fluctuate, the anchor holds. Alignment also simplifies decision-making. When principles are clear, choices become fewer, though not always easier. Confidence increases because energy is no longer wasted negotiating with every new pressure. The path may be narrow, but it is well defined. Over time, this clarity produces steadiness. Others may misinterpret it as stubbornness or inflexibility, but it is neither. It is fidelity. In contrast, those who anchor confidence in cultural approval must continually reinvent themselves. Their certainty is conditional, their values adjustable. This creates exhaustion. The self becomes fragmented, constantly adapting to remain acceptable. Such fragmentation erodes confidence, even when external success is achieved. Alignment with eternal principles heals this fragmentation by unifying belief, behavior, and purpose. Earned confidence, then, is not rebellious for its own sake, nor traditional out of nostalgia. It is the natural result of standing on what does not shift. When a person has watched enduring truth remain intact while opinions cycle and systems fail, confidence becomes inevitable. It is not loud because it does not need to persuade. It is not defensive because it does not depend on agreement. It stands quietly, firmly, because it is aligned with something that was not invented by the moment and will not be erased by the next one. Faith that has never been tested is indistinguishable from assumption. It may feel sincere, sound convincing, and even inspire action for a time, but until it encounters resistance, its strength remains unknown. Pressure is the instrument that reveals whether belief is merely inherited language or personally anchored conviction. When faith survives scrutiny, delay, and adversity, it transforms from hopeful expectation into earned confidence. Testing exposes the difference between what we say we trust and what we actually rely upon. In moments of ease, belief requires little sacrifice, but when outcomes are postponed, when answers are absent, and when circumstances contradict expectation, faith is forced to operate without immediate reinforcement. This is not cruelty, it is calibration. Belief that depends on instant confirmation is fragile. Belief that endures silence and uncertainty gains depth. Scrutiny is often misunderstood as hostility toward faith, yet it is one of faith's greatest allies. Honest questioning strips away superstition, sentimentality, and borrowed convictions. What remains may feel smaller at first, but it is stronger. Faith refined by examination is precise. It knows what it trusts and why. This clarity is essential because vague belief cannot sustain confidence under pressure. Precision breeds stability. Delay is another form of testing that strengthens confidence. When expected outcomes do not arrive on schedule, faith is tempted to renegotiate its commitments. The question becomes whether belief was anchored in truth or in timing. Those who persist through delay learn that reliability is not measured by speed. Confidence grows as patience confirms that truth operates beyond immediacy, according to purposes not always visible in the moment. Pressure finally reveals hierarchy. When multiple beliefs compete under stress, the one truly trusted will govern decisions. This is where faith moves from theory to authority. Each time belief guides action despite fear, cost, or uncertainty, it earns credibility. Confidence forms not because the path was easy, but because faith proved sufficient when alternatives failed. There is an internal transformation that accompanies this process. Faith that has endured testing produces peace rather than agitation. It no longer needs constant reassurance. It is comfortable with mystery because it has learned that uncertainty does not equal abandonment. This composure is often mistaken for indifference, but it is the opposite. It is engagement without panic, conviction without noise. The world often celebrates dramatic expressions of belief while overlooking quiet endurance. Yet endurance is the true measure of strength. Anyone can believe when circumstances cooperate. Confidence is born when belief remains intact while circumstances resist. This kind of faith does not deny reality. It interprets it through a larger framework. Over time, tested faith develops memory. It remembers previous trials and the outcomes that followed. This memory becomes a reservoir of assurance. When new challenges arise, confidence draws from what has already been proven. The individual does not need to invent hope. It is recalled. Earned confidence, therefore, is not the absence of doubt, but the mastery of it. Doubt is acknowledged, examined, and answered through experience. Faith that has survived scrutiny, pressure, and delay becomes unshakable, not because it is rigid, but because it has been refined. It stands firm not by ignoring difficulty, but by having passed through it and emerged trustworthy on the other side. Responsibility is the proving ground of confidence. Before anyone is entrusted with influence, authority, or clarity of direction, they are first tested with what they are willing to carry. The world often reverses this order, granting titles before trust and visibility before verification. Yet, enduring systems, whether natural, moral, or organizational, operate on a consistent sequence. Responsibility comes first, and authority follows only after it has been demonstrated that responsibility can be borne without distortion. When responsibility is accepted rather than avoided, it exposes character. It reveals whether a person seeks power for control or stewardship. Carrying responsibility requires restraint, patience, and accountability. These traits are not developed through explanation, but through practice. Each obligation faithfully fulfilled becomes evidence that the individual can be trusted with more. Confidence grows because reliability has been established, not merely asserted. Clarity also follows discipline. Many seek understanding without structure, insight without order. But discipline is the framework within which perception sharpens. When a person commits to consistent habits aligned with enduring principles, confusion gradually gives way to coherence. Patterns emerge, consequences become intelligible. Confidence forms as uncertainty diminishes, not because questions vanish, but because the individual has learned how truth behaves when honored consistently. There is resistance to this process because discipline feels restrictive. Yet discipline does not limit freedom, it defines it. Without boundaries, energy is scattered. With boundaries, effort is focused. Confidence is not the product of unlimited options, but of deliberate commitment. When discipline governs behavior, decision-making becomes simpler, and confidence increases as hesitation decreases. Authority that precedes responsibility is dangerous. It produces entitlement without accountability. Such authority is insecure and must be defended aggressively. Authority that follows responsibility is stable. It does not need to assert itself because it has been earned. Others recognize it not through command, but through consistency. This recognition reinforces confidence, not as ego, but as confirmation of trustworthiness. Responsibility also trains endurance. Obligations do not pause when motivation fades. They require follow-through when enthusiasm is absent. This persistence builds internal strength. Confidence matures as the individual learns that they can remain faithful under routine pressure, not just crisis. Small responsibilities, carried over time, prepare the individual for larger ones without shock. Discipline creates margin. It orders priorities so that when disruption occurs, collapse does not follow. Confidence thrives in margin because it allows response instead of reaction. The disciplined individual is not easily overwhelmed because systems are already in place. This preparedness is not anxiety-driven. It is wisdom expressed through structure. Over time, responsibility reshapes self-perception. Instead of asking, "Am I capable?" the individual begins to ask, "What is required?" This shift is significant. Capability is proven through action. Requirement is defined by principle. Confidence grows as the gap between requirement and response narrows through practice. Earned confidence, then, is inseparable from responsibility and discipline. It is built quietly through faithfulness in unseen places and uncelebrated tasks. When authority or clarity eventually arrives, it does not feel foreign or intoxicating. It feels familiar. The individual stands steady, not because they were elevated suddenly, but because they have been strengthened gradually. This is confidence that does not wobble under weight, because weight is what trained it to stand. Trials are often interpreted as disruptions, unwelcome interruptions to progress, clarity, or peace. Yet in reality, they function as instruments, precisely calibrated to reveal the authenticity of what is believed. Nothing tests confidence more effectively than adversity, because adversity removes the comforts that allow illusion to survive. When conditions are favorable, belief can remain theoretical. When pressure arrives, belief is forced to perform. Every trial applies force to a structure. What is sound remains intact. What is superficial fractures. This is not punishment, but diagnosis. Trials expose assumptions that have never been examined and convictions that have never been verified. In doing so, they provide an opportunity not merely to endure, but to authenticate. Confidence that emerges from such moments is not emotional relief, it is structural assurance. Illusion cannot survive sustained difficulty. Pretended certainty collapses under prolonged strain. But truth, when properly anchored, becomes more visible in adversity. Trials clarify priorities by stripping away excess. They reveal what truly governs decisions when options are limited. This revelation is invaluable because confidence requires honesty. One cannot trust what one has never seen tested. There is also a refining effect. Trials do not merely expose weakness, they strengthen what remains. Resistance produces capacity. Just as muscles grow under load, conviction deepens under challenge. The very pressure that threatens to break belief can become the mechanism that fortifies it. Confidence grows not despite trials, but because of them. Timing is critical in this process. Trials often arrive before understanding. This creates discomfort, but it also prevents overconfidence. The individual is forced to rely on principles rather than comprehension. When outcomes later confirm the wisdom of those principles, confidence becomes retrospective as well as immediate. One learns to trust not only the result, but the process. Trials also dismantle the illusion of control. They reveal the limits of human planning and the instability of external securities. This exposure is unsettling, but necessary. Confidence anchored in control is brittle. Confidence anchored in truth is flexible. It adapts without surrendering its foundation. This adaptability is a mark of maturity. Another function of trials is memory formation. Experiences of endurance become reference points for future challenges. When new adversity arises, confidence draws strength from recollection. This has been faced before, and it did not invalidate what was trusted. Such memory transforms fear into caution and panic into vigilance. The individual remains alert but unshaken. Importantly, trials demand participation. They cannot be outsourced or observed from a distance. This personal engagement ensures that confidence remains earned, not inherited. No explanation can substitute for experience. Those who have walked through difficulty carry a weight of assurance that cannot be borrowed or imitated. The world often seeks to eliminate discomfort, viewing it as an enemy of progress. Yet discomfort is frequently the environment in which clarity is produced. Trials focus attention, refine judgment, and expose what truly matters. They are severe teachers, but effective ones. Earned confidence, therefore, bears the imprint of adversity. It is recognizable by its calm under pressure and its refusal to dramatize difficulty. It does not deny pain or minimize loss. It simply refuses to allow hardship to redefine truth. Trials authenticate belief by proving that it remains functional when circumstances are hostile, and once belief has survived such testing, confidence ceases to be aspirational. It becomes established, settled, and resilient. True confidence rarely announces itself. It does not rush to be noticed, nor does it depend on constant reinforcement from others. It is quiet because it is settled. Noise often signals insecurity. Volume compensates for instability. Earned confidence, by contrast, rests. It has nothing to prove because it has already been proven through experience, discipline, and alignment with truth that does not shift. Stability is the defining feature of this confidence. When circumstances change, it adjusts without panic. When challenged, it responds without hostility. This composure is not emotional detachment, but internal order. The individual knows what governs their decisions, and that knowledge prevents overreaction. Confidence that is anchored beyond the self is not threatened by disagreement or delay, because its foundation is not personal approval or immediate outcome. Resilience emerges naturally from this anchoring. When confidence is rooted in something external and enduring, setbacks do not register as identity threats. Failure becomes information rather than condemnation. Correction is received as refinement, not rejection. This posture allows growth without collapse. The self remains intact even when plans unravel because worth and direction are not tied to flawless performance. Anchored confidence also produces restraint. It knows when to speak and when to remain silent. It does not mistake reaction for courage or impulse for conviction. This restraint is often misunderstood in a culture that equates confidence with assertiveness. Yet restraint requires greater strength than display. It reflects trust in process rather than desperation for control. Because this confidence is anchored beyond the self, it is also transferable. Others feel its presence not through persuasion, but through reliability. Decisions are predictable, boundaries are consistent, and commitments are honored. This predictability fosters trust. Leadership, influence, and credibility emerge as byproducts, not objectives. Confidence becomes a stabilizing force rather than a dominating one. There is also an absence of envy in earned confidence. Comparison loses its power when identity is secure. Success in others does not threaten. Failure in others does not elevate. The anchored individual measures progress against principle, not against peers. This frees energy that would otherwise be spent on rivalry and self-defense. Confidence deepens as attention shifts from image to integrity. Anchored confidence withstands isolation. When consensus dissolves or support withdraws, it remains. This does not mean it rejects counsel or community, but that it is not dependent on them for validation. Solitude does not erode it. Silence does not intimidate it. This independence is not arrogance, but assurance that truth does not require an audience. Such confidence is also patient. It does not rush outcomes or manipulate timing. It trusts that alignment with enduring principles will produce results in due course, even if recognition never arrives. This patience is a form of faith expressed through restraint. It resists the temptation to force visibility or accelerate processes prematurely. In the end, earned confidence is recognized by its fruit. It produces steadiness in chaos, humility in success, and perseverance in delay. It does not fluctuate with mood or momentum. It remains because it is anchored beyond circumstance and beyond self. This is confidence that cannot be manufactured or imitated. It is formed over time, refined through pressure, and sustained by truth. Quiet, resilient, and unshakable, it stands, not because it demands attention, but because it does not need it.